Welcome. Good morning to everyone. I don't know if it's us or if it's the heat, but it seems like we've drawn quite a crowd this morning, and we're gratified. You know, one of the perks of working in the public affairs office is we get to meet some really cool people, some exceptional people who do exceptional work, and a lot of the people who do that exceptional work are on patrol. A lot of the magic, a lot of that work, the exceptional work happens on patrol, but quite frequently, sometimes the people you're hearing from are people who are detectives in some of these high-profile units, and they do important work too. But sadly, a lot of that work in patrol is overlooked. Today, it's not. There's a patrol guy who I met a little while ago. I've been hearing about for a couple of days. His name's Eric Schneider, 32-year-old guy. Been with our department for just about 8 years. He's with our crime reduction unit over in the University City Division, working off-duty this past weekend out at the epicenter just to set the table. It's a 26-year-old guy upstairs, gets into some kind of back and forth with somebody in one of the clubs upstairs, asked to leave. He leaves, but somewhat irate after being asked to leave, takes it upon himself to put his hand and his arm through a plate glass window. Probably not the smartest thing to do. Right? Most responsible thing to do, and unfortunately it could have been deadly for this 26-year-old guy had it not been for the guy to my left who you're about to meet, Eric Schneider. Eric got out there, jumped quickly into action, did some heroic work, and I'm going to let him fill in the blanks. I will preface this by saying, and I was forewarned, that Eric's not the kind of guy to toot his own horn, so we may have to pull it out of him a little bit, but this is an important story that our community needs to know about nonetheless. Eric Schneider.
Good morning. Good morning. So this past Sunday, I was working off duty at Rooftop 210 for one of their day parties. They've had parties for the last 4 weeks. We work out there with the same group of guys. We all get along. We all know what to expect out of each other. And it's usually pretty calm. We never have any issues out there. Even after the drinks are flowing, you know, people start to get in arguments, people are asked to leave, and for the most part, they do. And this was just another occasion on Sunday. It was probably around 7 o'clock, and this young man got into a verbal altercation, was asked to leave. It took a little bit to calm him down, but he did. He left, gave us a pat on the shoulder, said thank you. But not 5 minutes later, we had another citizen come up to us and say that there was somebody downstairs on the first floor bleeding really bad. So Detective Comer and I, was my partner at the time, went downstairs to try to see what was going on. And we saw a broken window at Strike City and a large amount of blood. Looked like arterial spray to me. So we followed the trail of blood down to the street just outside the epicenter, and our 26-year-old victim was up against the fence, barely conscious. He was still answering some questions. His girlfriend at the time had his shirt covering the wound, and I knew that we had to apply a tourniquet. So pretty much I gloved up, put a tourniquet on his arm, and he got sent off to the hospital.
Got a follow-up call, did you not, or some notification from the medical staff?
I did. I had heard, I guess through the grapevine here and there, that the doctor had mentioned that 100% the application of the tourniquet in the right spot saved his life.
Can you show me the tourniquet? Do you
Sure.
have it on you? Just I know you guys will keep video for it, just so what these things look like. Can you talk about the training associated with that?
So we're provided with multiple different tools that we have at our disposal at any given time, just depending on the circumstance and the situation. And you never really know when you're going to need that or any of those tools. We train monthly in the crime reduction unit, firearms training, sometimes driving training. We also incorporate the tourniquets as well, using them under stress on ourselves, on others. We also have micro training that the entire department does on a weekly basis, and sometimes they do involve the tourniquets. So for the last 5 or 6 years or so, just having practice using that tourniquet, and it just worked. It worked out well. I fell back on my training as soon as I knew what I needed to do, and that's that.
Let's open it up for questions to Officer Schneider.
Have you been in contact with the man whose life you did save? Has he reached out to you to say thank you at all?
I have not. I've actually been on vacation since that day. But from what I had heard, his life was saved that day.
How does that make you feel?
It's humbling. It reminds me of why I do the job that I do and why I signed up to do it. I'd rather just, be proud of myself and then have to stand up here and explain what happened. But no, I'm very proud.
Can you show us where the injury was?
Sure. So it was on his right arm, and from what I could tell, it was a double pane glass window. So after he punched through it, I was probably when he was taking his fist out, and there was some kind of laceration from, like a vertical laceration right around the forearm spot right there.
Can I ask a question? Does this gentleman have anything to do with it?
No, we're going to get to that in a second,
It's just
Colleen.
confusing when you put your hand on like,
Who else?
It was just out of frustration that he had been kicked out of the.
Well, yeah, I think we've all been there. We're all human. You got to have a good time. Drinks start flowing. You just might not be having a good day. I mean, we're all there. We've all been there before. I have. I'm sure you have. And some decisions are just shouldn't have been made. And unfortunately for him, this one didn't cost his life. So.
Is the tourniquet something that y'all carry like whenever you're on patrol? That's how you're...
On duty, off duty, I carry it even when I'm not even working. You never know when you're going to need it.
Just for spelling purposes, do you mind doing your last name for us, please?
Schneider, Schneider.
Obviously, most importantly, this man's going to be okay and survive. Just how did the business react? I'm just curious. Have you been in contact with the business just about what happened there?
I have not, but based on my experience working bars and clubs like this, nothing's personal. If you get kicked out, it's best to just leave, come back another day, and typically that's exactly how it happens.
And what about the business that he punched the window in?
I have not been in contact with any of them, so I don't know.
We're going to make Officer Schneider available for anybody interested in one-on-ones. He's got a little bit of time to hang out and chat with us a little bit more. So if anybody's interested in advancing the story a little bit more, just see us afterwards.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Thank you. Appreciate you, man. Right? Humble guy. Professional guy. Love to say that this is unique to Officer Schneider, but there's just a multitude of people in this organization who do work just like that, and encouraging to know that they're there, and we want to push those stories as frequently as possible. Now, shifting gears, Colleen, we will talk about this fella. Christian Holt, obviously the graphic tells the story. Mr. Holt's been arrested. But it's not the first time Mr. Holt's been arrested. Mr. Holt's been arrested quite a few times. At only 22 years old, he's built quite the resume Mr. Holt has in the way of property crime, just a prolific property offender. He was recently arrested in our Independence Division when he was attempting to break into cars out that way in East Charlotte, and there were warrants, 7 warrants for his arrest for other auto break-ins that he was responsible for. It was thanks to an alert community member who tipped off some of our officers out in Independence that allowed us to get out there, our patrol officers to get out there, identify him, bring him into custody before he had an opportunity to prey on yet another member of our community. There's a reason why we have his mugshot splashed up on the screen today. We want to set the table on something that's really important, and that's larcenies from auto. Right, cars that are getting broken into. We talked about violent crime and high profile that is, and as much attention as violent crime gets, for good reason. That's serious. That's a serious offense. But community members who live and work here really need to know they are far more likely to have their car broken into or have their car stolen, thankfully, than being the victim of any kind of violent, horrific crime. It's important. It happens a lot. And a lot of it's just so preventable because of the vehicles that are left unlocked, because of vehicles that have that have belongings in plain sight. We've had campaign after campaign after campaign. I don't know how many times we've beaten this drum about locking your vehicle up, especially with valuables in it, including guns. And we'll talk a little bit more about that this morning as well. Contrary to what a lot of people think, I remember when I was on patrol and you talk to people who you've locked up for breaking into cars, they'll be the first ones to tell you, look, I'm not a criminal mastermind. I lift door handles. You know, I'm not smashing into things. I'm just looking for the point of least resistance and how easy and fast is it to lift a door handle. Cecil Brisbane, formerly over criminal investigations, violent crime. He's with our Providence Division now, commander out there. I want him to, if he could, to discuss what we're seeing so far this year, seeing a bit of a spike in auto thefts and some larcenies from auto, and more importantly, what we can do to safeguard our property and take care of ourselves. Captain Brisbane.
It's been a while. First of all, I want to thank you guys for coming. It's always a pleasure to be able to give you some information that can help the general public, and we always appreciate you and all your stations. I want to start this today just by showing you a little video of how quickly people attempt to get into your car. So this doesn't mean they're actually in, just a quick attempt to get into a vehicle. So you can't see the doors that he's pulling. But just that quickly, he realized that vehicle was secure and he walked away. I want to contrast that with showing you another video that actually shows you how fast someone can actually get into your vehicle and take items out of it. See the doors open, he's in there now rummaging around. The beautiful thing about it is a lot of people have these Ring cameras now, these doorbell cameras, and it makes our job a little easier because it gives us an opportunity to put out some information and to use that information on our initial investigation. So those have helped us with our success rate. However, that's not the big thing. The big thing that we want to talk about is the fact that almost a third of the vehicles that are stolen in our community and a third of the vehicles that are broken into in our community are vehicles that were unsecured. So what that means is we are providing easy opportunities for criminals to get access to our things. And I realize that we all get busy and we all get distracted, and sometimes we forget to lock our valuables up. But as Rob said, we've talked about this before, and it's just one of those things that we're going to continue to harp on. We need people to remember to lock their vehicles and secure their valuables because this all leads somewhere. So we talk about the cars being broken into, we talked about the cars being stolen, but we haven't even mentioned the guns that come out of these cars. So what makes this situation worse is about 40-something, 42%, somewhere around there, percent of the guns that are stolen in our area are stolen, the guns that are stolen out of vehicles. About 42% of those guns are stolen from cars that were unlocked and unsecured. So that means that we're creating easy opportunities for somebody to take our property. And once they take that property, we cannot determine what they're going to do with those weapons. Those weapons may wind up being used for some type of violent crime, or they may wind up being used in the gun trade or gun sale. So I'm just coming before you this morning to really ask that you ask your viewers to pay attention to their surroundings and to pay attention to their vehicles, pay attention to their keys. You know, you've got to secure your valuables. You've got to lock your car. You've got to take your key fobs out of your car. We've had situations lately where people have one car that's unsecured, but they have the key fob for the car that's parked right next to it in the car. So you get your car broken into, you lose valuables in that car, and then you get your second car stolen because you left your key fob in your second car. Quite frankly, that's something that we'd like to see a decrease in because we don't want anybody to become victimized. But as Rob alluded to earlier as well, the majority of crimes in our community are property crime driven. And so we've got to do everything that we can to help reduce that level of victimization. And that starts by us partnering with our community and community members, reminding each other to secure their valuables and to lock their doors. If we can get that done, we could have a huge reduction in some of these crimes.
Questions for the captain?
Captain, one of the scary things about some of the latest reports we've been reporting on is the victims did everything right. They were telling us they locked their doors, didn't have purses or wallets. It happened at South Park Mall in one of the busiest places around, and there were 4 there, there were 11 nearby the mall, and then there were 12 in Uptown. First of all, what do you tell the victims who are doing everything right and their windows are shattered? And can you give any update about those cases?
First, I'd like to say that we appreciate it when people are doing things right. Doing things right doesn't mean that you won't be a victim, though. So there are situations when you're doing everything right and you still become victimized. That's something that's extremely unfortunate. It's something that we wish we could put an end to, and that's why we partner not only with the community, but also with some of these business locations. You mentioned the crimes recently at South Park Mall. I know for a fact that in regards to those, there was some video footage that officers were able to get that are helping them with that investigation, where they may have a potential vehicle leaving the scene that they're working up right now. I do not know how far down the road we are in that investigation, but I know that the police department has an exceptional relationship with the management at South Park Mall and the surrounding areas, and it was actually an officer who put that information out on Nextdoor to let the community know that there had been several car break-ins the day before, so that they could address those appropriately. I don't know the combination between that and the ones that happened uptown.
And what about the ones near the mall, the 11 other cases? Do you believe those are connected?
I don't know if they're connected or not, but the detectives will be following up on that. You know, we look at every crime as an individual crime until we can find that connection, and once we find that connection, we'll do everything we can to hold the person responsible for every crime that they've committed. So the reality is that the detectives assigned to that case are still working that right now. They've actually had a meeting with South Park, and I think they're getting ready to work on some staffing things that where we're going to partner together to increase the visibility of not just our staff, but also of some of the security staff out there as well.
Anybody else for the captain? Jane.
Captain, I know you had the, a few months back, you had the initiative where CMPD gave out the car gun safes.
Yes, ma'am.
Do you know if sales of those have gone up overall in Charlotte? People are trying to lock up their guns, or would CMPD consider giving them out again?
I don't know what the numbers look like in terms of people using those or people attempting to purchase them. I do know that when we did that, we ran out of those really quickly. So I do know that there are a lot of people who wanted to use them. I just can't tell you whether or not there's been a continuation of that process.
Do you know if the department, or if Rob could check in, would the department give them out again?
I'll dress up and come back up there, Jane. Yep.
Related to the stolen gun issue, what we were told by some of the victims that they were told by police is that the thieves were looking for firearms, both in the South Park Mall cases and the nearby ones and the Uptown ones. Can you tell us about what you know about if that was the goal or the motive for those suspects?
I can't specifically tell you that they were looking for firearms, but I do know that in regards to trucks and SUVs, those are targeted for firearms, especially in commercial locations like malls, sporting good locations, and things of that nature. And that's something that's been a nationwide trend.
Why is that? Is there an association?
I think, and it would be an assumption on my part, so I'm not speaking specifically for the department, but I think people assume that people who drive those types of vehicles also carry firearms. So if you're looking at a truck, you assume that that person may or may not be a hunter and may have a weapon in their vehicle.
And Captain,
Yes, ma'am.
as you mentioned that you guys have talked about this ad nauseum, over and over you've addressed this issue. At this point, is this a situation where some people just don't care, don't listen about locking their doors?
I would never say that. I think what you're looking at is you're looking at an issue where, regardless of how many times we put this message out there, that doesn't mean that the message is reaching everybody. And some people don't understand that until they've actually been victimized. But the other thing is, because we know this is how these things happen, it's our responsibility to continue to address that issue. There may be a few people who think it's a path of least resistance to leave their things unsecured without anything in it, and therefore people can open the door and realize there's nothing there. However, I wouldn't suggest that. But I do think that, you know, people want to secure their valuables. They pay for things, they want to keep those things. Unfortunately, we have a hard time getting this message out to everybody, so we'll just continue to push this message forward.
Can I also ask, in terms of the difficulty, is this one of those crimes where it's so transient, like car thieves or people looking to steal from cars, they don't necessarily stay in one area, right? Is that something that you would see? Do they move around a lot?
Yeah, I think the access to vehicles makes this type of crime a easy crime to do. I mean, you can go from neighborhood to neighborhood in a pretty quick manner. It doesn't matter if you're in a car, if you're on a bike, you're on a bus. Charlotte is a very well-connected city. The roadways in Charlotte make it easy to get access to any community. And because of that, you have crimes that are committed across all sections of the community by some of the same individuals.
Cool. All right, Captain, we appreciate you. Yep. Thanks, sir. Yeah, just, Jane, we haven't had those discussions yet with private sector. I know that there's a number of discussions that are actually developing as we speak concerning what we can do to get out in front of this. You know, if summer's any indication, historically, you know, we see this kind of activity start to increase, you know, with more and more people. I mean, June was just off the hook, especially in the stolen car area, with people leaving their keys in the car, whether they're starting them to cool them down before they get in, you know, with the air conditioner on, or just leaving the keys and the fobs in the car. So June's been just an exceptional month for this kind of behavior. But I think everything's on the table. You know, to his point, you know, those gun safes that we provided to the community, they just flew off the shelf like hotcakes. I don't think it'd be unreasonable to expect us to revisit that with the private sector again and consider doing something along the lines that we did last year. So don't want to say, never say never is what I'm saying. You know, Alex, you asked a question about SUVs and trucks and sporting. You know, I was talking with the captain. He'd also mentioned, and I think may have failed to mention this time too, you know, it's not just the SUVs and the sporting areas and things like that they're targeting. They're also looking for bumper stickers of people who have, you know, a Glock bumper sticker in a car or a truck, or Smith & Wesson or NRA or something like that. You know, chances are, you know, if, you know, that could be a vehicle that may have a gun in it, you know, and these thieves are looking for specific items that might be a good tell for them to have a pretty good indication that there could be a gun in one of those cars or trucks. So just something to consider.
Rob, do you have any numbers?
Yes, well, I know across the board we have a 16% increase so far this year in auto theft, 2% increase year to date in car break-ins, but in June alone, I want to say it's a 10% uptick in car break-ins. So we're seeing that trend. It's spiking, and we really want to get out in front of this now before we start to really get involved in the summer and things really start to get out of control. He hit it on the head. You know, the overwhelming majority of people can really harden the target by simply clicking that fob and making sure the door's locked and the stuff's outside of the vehicle. To Alex's point, are you ever 100% certain that you won't be victimized? Absolutely not. You know, there are rare occasions when somebody will smash a window, but the overwhelming majority of our car break-ins involve somebody simply lifting a handle of a car that's unlocked, and like we saw in the video, they're off to the races. So I just wanted to put that out there.
Can you repeat for me, you said 2% year-to-date in what?
2% year-to-date car break-ins from this time last year were up, but a 10% increase in the month of June from the month of June last year. Follow? Are you cool?
Yeah, I think so. So a 16% increase to date in auto theft, a 2% year-to-date in car break-ins, and a 10% June only compared to last year.
Yes, so year-to-date, January to June, we have a 2% increase in car break-ins. Last June compared to this June, just June, there is a 10% increase in car break-ins.
And that's like tens of thousands type scale, right? That's
Thousands, yes. This year, 4,700 car break-ins so far this year.
You taking general questions?
4,700 car break-ins this year. 1,500 of those cars were left unlocked or with the keys in them. Just to give you some additional numbers, 1,300 cars stolen this year. 1,300 cars, 406 of those cars had the keys left in them.
Question unrelated to the car break-ins. From a colleague working on, just want to get your response about the report about complaints and use of deadly force. And CMPD apparently down last year. What's your response about that report in general and the numbers being down?
Well, you know, nobody here is doing a victory lap. You know, one life lost during an officer-involved shooting is one life too many. It's tragic, unfortunately, sometimes it's, necessary when de-escalation isn't on the table. It is encouraging to see that the numbers are tracking in the right direction. We intentionally don't go out and have a press conference for that because we don't want to give the impression that this is something that we're celebrating. We want to make that information available to the community because it's important information. It's transparent. They should know the kind of work our people are involved with, especially when it could have some kind of adverse effect on what's going on with officer community member engagement. 622,000 engagement with the community, 622,000 interactions between officers and community members just in 2017 alone. Out of that 622,000 times that officers engaged or interacted with the community, 146 of them resulted in misconduct allegations of some sort, right? So just to paint a picture and to give you an illustration and some context of how frequently it happens. I will say out of those 146 cases, I don't have the statistics in front of me, but I would venture to say that the overwhelming majority of those 146 cases of misconduct were complaints that were internally filed by other officers or supervisors in the field, because that's the way it historically happens here in the organization. More than 10,000 encounters with people that were armed with our officers. So just to set the table, 10,000 times at least our officers engaged or interacted with armed individuals in the community, and very few of those, thankfully, resulted in anything that would turn into a fatal situation or a situation where an officer had to use any kind of force. So it's a testament to de-escalation. It's a testament to restraint and the professionalism, I think, that our officers exhibit day in and day out. Again, nothing to celebrate, just something to keep an eye on. I mean, we can't manage it if we're not measuring it, and that's what we're doing, is we're measuring it.
You guys had a briefing about this last year, though.
We did. Last year, we had, unfortunately, we didn't have such a great year compared to the year prior, and we felt it was appropriate to get it out there and try to explain some of the circumstances involving that. I remember Major Patterson out there talking about that, about what we were seeing and trying to give some context there. Certainly that wasn't a celebration either, because the numbers were upside down last year. Again, encouraging to see the numbers heading in the direction that they're heading in, but certainly no reason to be popping champagne bottles following something like this.
Is CMPD taking any steps to influence those numbers that we're seeing?
Yeah, daily. I mean, whether it's the training, diversity training, de-escalation training, the work that we're doing and continuing to do in the organization. I like to think a lot of that has a pretty big ripple effect in what you're seeing with the numbers. Is there a way to quantify that? Not a way to quantify that, but that's certainly something anecdotal that should be paid attention to.
Rob, I don't know if the captain can comment. I guess there were some reports about, the heat, people leaving their windows open and car thieves getting in that way. I don't know if he can comment about that.
If he can't, windows being left open. He was that close.
You can bring your purse in here.
Yeah.
Listen,
Okay.
you cannot make fun of the man bag that my wife bought me. I love that bag, and I will carry it because my wife purchased it. And that's what men should do. They should carry what their spouses buy for them.
I think the question was car windows left open?
So the reality is that's part of it. And you look at the summer months, you have car windows left open, left cracked, and people leave their keys in. It makes it easily accessible. That is the same as the issue that we have in the wintertime when people leave their cars running at gas stations and things of that nature because it's cold outside and they're trying to keep their cars warm. So some of the things that we do to lead to this victimization is to try and create a level of comfort for ourselves, not really realizing that creating that level of comfort for ourselves can actually make us a victim.
Cool. Thank you. Yeah. Don't go away. There could be more.
Oh, no. I'm taking my man first.
He's a good sport. Anybody else for the greater good of the order before we part company and get on about our day? Sorry?
Run those videos again.
Well, actually, I'll go do a step better. We'll email it to you. Yeah, does that work? Yep, and that Christian Holtcat, the one that we talked about out of the gate, we'll have a press release on what he was specifically charged with and all the relevant information to go along with that. So, appreciate it. Thanks.
Be careful. Take care.